I couldn't bring myself to touch the closet doors or to shut them. I just bolted past right into their room. I shook my mother awake, and she groggily asked what was wrong. Telling her I was scared, she just told me to get into the bed. I climbed up into the bed and under the covers. I still felt very frightened, and suddenly I had an urge to look over my mother. From the doorway of her and my stepfather's room, you could see my doorway clearly. I was frozen staring at my doorway. It was this magnetic feeling like I couldn't look away. And as I watched, I saw the most terrifying thing. The shadow of a hand slid out from my room. Then a head, followed by a leg, and finally an entire body. Here I was now looking at a shadow of a man on the wall. It stood there for a moment, and then it began to creep, as if sneaking carefully down the hall so as not to be detected. And there it went, out of sight. I shook my mother, but she was already awake. She told me she saw it too, and just to go back to sleep. So that's what I did. I remember the day that we moved from the apartment. I was over the moon happy to be gone from it. My mother had gotten pregnant, and we just didn't have enough room for my soon-to-be baby brother. My stepfather was oddly attached to the place. Where my mother and we felt constant fear, he felt at home. He never wanted to leave, and he even tried to convince my mother that we could figure out a situation for my brother to fit, which was pretty much impossible since there was only 2 rooms. The place had a hold on him. And looking back now, I think he has an energy that spirits are drawn to. And I think they like to keep him around as much as possible. I remember driving up to grab the last box out of the apartment. My stepfather asked if I wanted to come in with him, but I refused. And still to this day, to be honest, I don't think anyone could pay me to spend another night in that place. It remains the most negative place I have ever stayed in. And I don't ever want to go back. I'll be back right after this. Hello, have you heard of Anchor? Well, let me tell you why it's the easiest way to make your new podcast. Anchor is free to use, and it has creation tools that allow you to record and edit right from your phone or computer. Anchor is there to take the hassle and worry out of distribution for you as well. They will distribute your podcast for you. You could be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcast, and many more. As if this wasn't enough, you can also make money from your Anchor podcast. You just pick slots in your episodes for ad space, and Anchor will match you up with sponsors so you can start monetizing quickly as possible. Anchor is everything you need to make a podcast assembled in one easy place. So download free Anchor app today or go to anchor.fm to get started today. That's ANCHOR.FM. What are you waiting for? Make your voice heard today with the Anchor app. Now, for my second story, I'm going to be moving ahead in time a little bit. My mother, my brother, and my stepfather and I all had moved back to the United States after being in Germany for a little over a year at the time. My stepfather had been medically discharged from the military for health reasons, and we were going back to our small town home of Shelby, Montana. Both my mother and father, they had grown up there, and all of their family was in Montana. So this seemed like the best place to lay down our roots as a new family. For the first little bit, we actually didn't have anywhere to live, and my grandmother had offered to take us in for the time, until we could find a place of our own. It gave her a lot of time with me and my newborn brother. My grandmother, she always loved having the grandchildren around, all 6 of us at the time. And having me and my brother around, I think, brought her a lot of joy. I remember being really excited to be staying with her, too. You know, she was my favorite person to be around, and things were really light and fun for me at the time. I wish that we could just stay there forever, but that was not how things would turn out. My mother and stepfather, they got to looking for a house fairly quickly. And about the second one, my stepfather had fallen in love with it. It was a fairly big home, and it only technically had 2 bedrooms, but the laundry room was being used as a 3rd bedroom by the family that lived there now. So this would allow for us to fit comfortably in the home. My mom was pretty hesitant about purchasing. Montana has very harsh winters, and the driveway was rather steep. But my stepfather was just very drawn to it, and he managed to convince her with the help of the real estate saleswoman. She was very keen to sell them on the place. She even made it known to my mother that anything in the house was negotiable to stay. I remember my mom joking about this at the time, that was what the real estate woman had told the Lutz family from the Amityville Horror, if you know that story. This would end up being a strange piece of irony in later years. Another odd thing of note that had been told to my parents by the owners before we took possession was there was supposedly an oil spot that would appear in the living room on the carpet every few months. They said they figured it was because of a man who had lived in the home previously. He apparently worked on bikes in the living room during the winter. The garage would get way too cold for him to stay out for long in the wintertime. The couple who lived there told my parents the name of a cleaner they could use even to get the stain up when it would, eventually come back. All these little odd things didn't really seem to mean anything at the time, so my mom and stepfather, they agreed to take the house. Soon we would be moving in, and out of the comfort of my grandmother's home. The house needed a lot of work, and we would end up fixing many things over the years. My mother talked about moving from it all the time, even though my stepfather really just wouldn't hear of it. It was just a normal house to me, and I enjoyed it a lot in the beginning. I'd never lived in such a big place before. My mom and I, we had lived in a small apartment, and my dad, he lived in a small home across town for the longest time. So it was really kind of awesome to have this huge yard to play in and just be a kid. The bliss was soon interrupted, though. I had been given the laundry room as my bedroom. It was not my favorite arrangement, as the room was attached to the boiler room, which freaked me out. Basements, boiler rooms, all kind of scary to a child at the time. The room also had almost no natural lighting, because it was built into the ground for the most part. A lot of sections of the house, were built into the side of a hill. There was a small rectangular window, probably about the size of, I'd say, like a cereal box. So the room just naturally felt dark. Still, at first I was pretty comfortable playing in that room. I didn't have many issues with it. But things did start to happen gradually. Things went missing in the house a lot. My mom would put a pacifier for my brother down, and it would be gone a few minutes later. We would tear the house apart looking for it, and eventually just have to give up and buy a new one. This happened with a lot of other objects throughout the house as well. Months or weeks later, we would find them sitting in plain sight, as if they'd been there the whole time. And as with most paranormal things that my mother would bring up with my stepfather, he would simply explain it away. And with little things like this, it was easy to do at first. The next thing to become apparent in the house was the sound of footsteps. All hours of the night you would hear footsteps all throughout the house. In the kitchen, the hallway, leading up to the bathroom and my bedroom. It would quickly begin to take on a new feeling. I wasn't really comfortable in my room anymore. I just felt watched and never alone. I would soon start to dread going to bed at night. It became ritual for me to drag my feet. Taking showers in the evenings even became frightening. It would feel like someone was standing in front of the door watching me. The whole time I would periodically peek out from the curtain to check, and no one was ever there. The next layer of activity that was added